Hi, this is Dr. Mathew Knowles, and I want to just invite you all to come in to Empowered Fridays. Um, First, though, let me thank my friend Dr. Jacqueline King, the Black Women Empowered organization and movement, for giving me this opportunity to spend these Fridays with you, to get your feedback, to hear your perspective, for you to hear mine, and just to have a conversation. I don't know, it's not planned. We'll just have a conversation. I'll unscript it. Sometimes I'll be in this room, I'll be in other rooms in our California home. Sometimes I'll be in our Houston home. But again, just to have a conversation with you. Let me just start off by saying happy holidays to all of you. And a lot of you will know about me. Some of you might know my background, but today I just wanted to set the groundwork. I wanted for future Empowered Fridays that you have the opportunity to actually on the fly, to give feedback in the chat room, to ask questions, and let's just make it fun. I don't believe in that we have to get to a place of confrontation ever. Again, to appreciate your perspective. I was born in a little small town in Gadsden, Alabama. Gadsden, Alabama. Yes, most of you don't know Gaston, but I was born in January 9th, 1952. So if you easily do the math, then you know this January 9th, I'll be 70 years old. I don't look it. Um, No, I tell you, my body feels like it from all the years of being an athlete, collegiately and in high school, and not making it to the NBA, and still playing like a fool on sandlot basketball. Uh, that has paid off equal to six operations, including a knee replacement, two arthroscopic shoulder, lung collapse, Achilles tendon. But again, going back to who I am, born in Gaston, Alabama. My mom, Lou Helen Hogue, it's her maiden name, Cherokee, half Cherokee Indian. My mother's side of the family. My dad, Mathew Knowles Sr. Uh, Look, these were good people. My mom born in Marion, Alabama, went to high school with Coretta King. Also, Andrew Young's wife also was in that class in Marion, Alabama. My mother didn't graduate. She went to the 11th grade at Lincoln Memorial High School in Marion. Actually used to braid Coretta King's hair. Uh, when she was young and in high school. And it's interesting that these three women would really associate and gravitate to the desegregation movement. And if you know anything about Marion, Alabama, T.D. Jakes is a distant cousin. He's also from Marion. This little small town in Alabama has the largest per capita of any city when you look at the population and the number of Black folks and the number of educated Black people that came out of this little small town. Alabama State University started there. But my mom moved to Gadsden, Alabama, met my father, Mathew Sr., um, blue collar worker, truck driver. My dad, not very educated, only actually went to the third grade. He had this joke that The first day in school, the books didn't show up. The second day of school, the teacher didn't show up. And the third day of school, the damn school caught on fire. My dad had a really dry sense of humor. But my dad was a good man who was a truck driver, made $30 a day. I'm sorry, I wish he did. He made $30 a week as a truck driver. My mom made $15 a week, $3 a day as a colored maid. And my parents were entrepreneurs. They convinced the white folks they worked for. My dad convinced them to let him use that truck. He would tear down the copper and the wood and all of the metals and sell them, tear down old houses. He would buy used cars and cars that weren't working actually, and he would sell all the parts. My mom would, on the weekend, make these beautiful quilts because she would ask the white woman to give her all her hand-me-downs and anything that was any type of apparel or any type of sheets, whatever they were, anything that she could turn into a quilt. And they made a really decent living from being entrepreneurs. And they gave me, by the way, for years I grew up on a dirt road there in Gaston. And for years, until I was about 14 years old, we had an outhouse. And that's my humble beginnings. But let me tell you something. All my grandparents, and I'm doing research now, my grandparents on both sides were entrepreneurs. My grandfather on my dad's side, his sons all had these great jobs in Gaston at the Republic Steel Plant and Goodyear. Those were the two. My granddad had 300 acres of land on my mother's side, and my idol, Dave Hogue. You hear me talk about Dave. But my parents instilled this thing in me. They taught me to dream. They empowered me. That's why we call this Empowered Fridays, because I hope in some way I can empower you to never stop dreaming, regardless of how old you get. Never stop dreaming, never. And that's what my parents did. My mom used to say, son, you can be whatever you want to be. You just have to work harder and smarter. I turn that around to, they helped me understand this word called passion. They helped me to understand how to get there, how to find my passion. I found my passion at a very early point in my livelihood. I always knew that I wanted to be a businessman. You know, when I was 10, 11 years old, you remember your kids and grown-ups would say, hey, honey, what are you going to be when you grow up? Well, my immediate response was a businessman. I always wanted to be a businessman, and I'll tell you why. And it goes to show who we are today. Most of it has to do what happened in our lives between 0 years old and 12 years old. Those are the impactful times of our life that empowers us to be who we are today. And there was a Reverend B.L. Walker who lived on our street. And actually, when my mom and dad were newlyweds, it was very common in the South that you might rent out a room in someone's home. And so my parents did that for 2 or 3 years with Reverend Walker. He was my godfather. as you know, growing up. But I used to sit and listen to him, and he was a man that would go from his home 2 blocks to the grocery store. And Reverend Walker would wear a suit. And as I got older, I would be like, Reverend Walker, why you put on that suit? And he said, son, it's about perception. And you know how ministers can say that. Son is about perception. And so I began to understand that as I got older in age. Perception, he used to always say it's all about who people in the South, who you hang out with, that's who you are. And so I learned at a very, very early age, going back to dreaming and wanting to be a businessman. I learned from my father, who was a volunteer Black fireman. See, in Gaston, Alabama in the 60s, 50s and 60s, and even the 70s, a Black man could not be a fireman because you had to live in this home together with the other firefighters. So they weren't having that in Alabama and many other southern states. So my dad would listen to a CB radio at all times of the night. And if there was a fire, he'd get up and whatever the time was, go and help out. My dad would help you out if he saw you, regardless of your color. He would help you out if he saw you on the side of the road and needed help. Oftentimes, because he was a big man, they call him Big Mac. He would help out in all sorts of ways, folks. My mom was no different. She was involved in the community, involved in the church, and she gave me the strength to do something that I'm very proud of. I never went to a Black school. You heard me right. I'm soon to be 70 years old, grew up in Gaston, Alabama, 1952, so elementary school in 1958, somewhere around there. Never went to a Black school. Integrated, desegregated, white schools. And that was tough. That was a rude awakening. Can you imagine as a kid what that was like to be made to feel less than, to be made to feel not equal, not smart, that you didn't belong? Those were some really challenging times for me as a kid. And as we talk on these Fridays of empowerment, and let me share with you, I believe that in my vulnerability lies my safety. And by that, I mean, I will share things with you about my life. They won't all be pretty. They won't all be things I'm proud of. But if I'm vulnerable and I can share those things, maybe I can help someone who's listening get through what they're going through. But growing up in Gaston and the racial trauma, and yes, trauma is real. You know, I can relate to women who say they were molested, or men, because that's not only a women thing. Young girls and boys that say they were molested when they were young, and how that impacts them today if they haven't got help for it. There was a period that I needed to get help for my trauma. And it took me a while in my life to realize that and to go to therapy, of which I spent 10 years and occasionally still go when I have a challenge in my life. And we all do, don't we? Don't we all have challenges in our lives? You know, and we all like to, sometimes I call it look good, but that's not real world. Real world is not, we're always doing great. You know, how you doing, Matthew? Great. Well, that's not always true, is it? Yeah, you answered it. No, it's not always true. Sometimes we go through many challenges in our life. So as I said, I never know where this is going to take us. I never know what Empowered Fridays or the conversation might be. That's why I'm looking forward to these Fridays. I'm looking forward to your feedback. We'll talk about all sorts of things. We'll talk about racism in America. We'll talk about health and wellness. Those of you that don't know, I'm a cancer survivor. And we'll talk more about that, and especially the importance of early detection. That's the whole key to disease. And a lot of you ladies have sons and husbands and fathers, and we tend to not want to go to the doctor. But I'm asking you to empower and to really persuade them to go and have early detection, PSA for prostate. The most important thing today is genetic testing. All of us, as we approach 40 years old, we should be looking at genetic testing, and we'll talk more about that. But we'll talk about the day-to-day conversations and how we can empower each other, not just me empowering you. That's not what this is all about. This is about a conversation we all can have and we can all share. And that's what these Fridays will look like. I thought today would just kind of be an introduction to myself, tell you some things about me. Once I left Gaston, Alabama, I never wanted to look back. When I tell you, I did not want to look back. I had so much anger, so much trauma, fear, all those emotions that Gaston, Alabama did for me, and George Wallace and racism. And it molded me. In some ways, it molded me to be even a better man. One of the things it did for me is, as we look at cultural intelligence and understanding different cultures and understanding that we are not all different. This whole thing, when people be like, yeah, well, we're all the same. No, we're not. Muslims are different than Christians. Asians are different than Africans. We're different, culturally different. How, as a Black man, I process, how I problem solve, how I communicate is different than a white man. And it's about time we get off of this whole thing. When I look in a room, I don't see color BS. That's a bunch of bull. When I walk into a room, I immediately see color. And so do you. And so does anybody else. I'd much rather it's time that we have real dialogue, real conversation, and talk about ways we really can empower each other. So as I continue my journey, because it's not the destination, folks, let me share with you. I was in Dallas. I'm a public speaker. Hopefully you have me come to one of your organizations and let me share some thoughts. But I was in Dallas, Texas, and I was doing a book signing. And I had this big box of books, and this white young man who worked there at the hotel and was helping me with my luggage. And we were walking to my hotel room, and I mean, my room was at the end of the hallway, but this was by far the longest hallway I had ever walked before. And halfway, I'll say, young man, like, are we almost at my room? He was like, no, Dr. Knowles, you're at the very end there. I was like, wow, man, this is, this is crazy. And he looked at me, and I shared this. I've had some very powerful thing come from people you never expect. Here's the bellman. He says, Dr. Knowles, it's not the destination, it's the journey. You see, we often think it's that destination we're trying to get to. I don't know, if here I am in California, the destination often for me is Houston. But the journey to get there is always different. Sometimes I encounter storms, sometimes I encounter delayed flights, sometimes I encounter sitting next to a fool, all of the above. That's kind of how life is, isn't it? When we start thinking about the destinations that we have. For some of us, destination is parenting. What is the destination for being a parent? For some of us, the destination is our employment. What is the destination of my job going to look like? Am I going to get promoted? Some of us, it's the destination of running a business. Some of it is the destination of our spirituality or our health and wellness. But I never forgot that. It's not the destination, it's the journey. And how do we participate in that journey? I often say, I'm so grateful to have, I always pinch myself to know that Beyonce and Solange are my daughters. That's an amazing thing. To have watched these two ladies' dreams come true. And I hope a lot of you love King Richards, because I certainly did. I was so proud to see a Black man and his role in the family and having a vision for Zena and Serena. That was really a remarkable movie. But when I think about my kids and what they've accomplished in life, and then my destination and my journey, because I haven't reached my destination yet. There's more to come. Left Gaston, went to college, was a high school basketball star, had a bunch of scholarships. Then I went to University of Tennessee and with a few others, about 25 of us, integrated University of Tennessee at Chattanooga and played ball there. And finally, we actually scrimmaged Fisk University. I didn't know who the hell Fisk University, had never even understood what an HBCU meant at that point in my life, because I've been around white folks all my life. And after the scrimmage, major school would pick a little small Black school to beat up on, kind of a practice. And the coach Fisk whispered in my ear, Knowles, if you ever need a school, I'm here for you. Well, part of my journey is that it came to a point that I needed a school. And so I called Coach Lawson, and he was there, and I ended up transferring to Fisk University. And I have a chapter in one of my books called Fisk Out of Waters, because I hadn't been around Black people. I didn't know how to communicate effectively with Black people. I didn't know how to party with Black people. I didn't know how to be loud. I didn't know any of that. I was just in a shell. Luckily, I had pledged Omega Psi Phi at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. So that helped me to have an immediate bond when I got to Fisk. Went on to enter into corporate America. And I, in Nashville, Tennessee, worked with AT&T. But I want to share something with you, because we're talking about Empowered Fridays. I want to share an interesting interview I had My first interview out of college, I was not prepared for the day after college. Uh, Unfortunately, Fisk didn't prepare me for the day after. I didn't prepare myself, and I'll be ultimately accountable for the day after college. So I take this interview. I never forget Mr. Hubert. Mr. Hubert was branch manager for IBM in Nashville, Tennessee. And in the 70s, I graduated in 74, IBM, Xerox. Those were the two main corporations in America, especially for Black folks to work. And so when I got to his interview, he had me sit down, and he's sitting there behind his chair. And he says to me, I love to role play. So I'm a role play. So he's looking at me and he's saying to me, well, Mathew, I'm going to do something interesting. I'm going to close the curtains. And he gets up and he closes the curtains. I'm like, what the hell is about to happen? And then he says to me, he says, I want you to imagine. Now I'm 74, I'm 22 years old. And he says, I want you to imagine now that you're 42 years old. And so he starts asking me these just rapid questions. How, where do you live? What city do you live? What kind of house do you live in? Are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have pets? What is your salary? What does your wife do for a living? How many kids? Are they girls and boys? All of these questions. Me being young, not understanding, he was trying to understand my vision for the future. And where did I see myself 20 years from now? I'm going to ask you a question. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Now, I've always had this thing, the beauty of silence. Because silence makes us really go to a place of thought. It grounds us. I often in the classroom, when I'm doing lectures or speeches, I'll just be quiet for a minute. Let people reflect. Where are you going to be in 10 years? And that's what was happening to me. And after I answered this rapid fire questions, he then asked me, he asked me the question. He said, Knowles, I don't have a sales position available for you here at IBM today, but I do have a marketing rep position. Marketing rep after they sell the computer, an IBM computer, a copier also at that time. You would go and explain how it worked. He said, but you know what? You have to answer me today. You can't go home, think about it. I want to answer right now. I'm offering you a job position right now at IBM. I said no. And he was like, what? I was like, no. That's not the position I came here for. I came here to apply for a sales position. Was that right or wrong? I'll let you judge that. But I can tell you that oftentimes we have to make those type of tough decisions, don't we? And so as I continue this journey with you tonight, went into corporate America, AT&T in Nashville, moved to Houston, didn't know anyone here but my fraternity brothers, young, out of college. Got a job with Xerox Corporation. Interesting how I got that job. I was hanging out with my frat brothers and some other young black men in Houston. Ladies, you know, back in the day, we were talking about Empowered Fridays. Well, we had another empowered type of Fridays when I was growing up in my 20s. And ladies, you know what I'm talking about. It was called Happy Hour Friday. Anybody can relate to that? Happy Hour Friday. Yeah, hopefully I'm not the only one. But I'm at a happy hour and the guys are hanging out and we're talking the stuff guys talk, you know, we're talking about business, we're talking about perspectives, goals, dreams, aspiration. Girls, yeah, we were single at the time, talking about that too. Little did I know, this little short white man came up to me and we had been there, gosh, I guess about an hour and a half. When he came up to me, he was like, well, I want to offer you a position at Xerox. And I'm like, huh, what? He says, I've been standing here listening to you guys for the past hour, and I'm impressed by you. What's your name? I told him my name, Mathew Knowles. It's amazing how these white boys always like to call me back then Knowles. I'm proud to say now it's Mr. Knowles or Dr. Knowles. But he saw something in me with a group of other guys that I was just hanging out with. What's the lesson inside of that? You never know who's listening, right? You never know who's listening, who's looking, who's inquiring, who's observing. We never know, especially in this new digital age that we live in. And so that's how I got my job at Xerox. Simply use over recruitment. And back then, we're talking, 78. And Houston was like the prime area to be. That's why I moved here. You have to go where the action is sometimes. Hope you heard that. Sometimes you have to leave where you are. If you want to reach that destination, you got to get the hell up out of there. Some of you need to get the hell up out of there. That could be the city, the marriage, the job. It might be time to get the hell up out of there. But I came to Houston, and that's what this is going to be, folks. I want to give you a taste and a sense of what these Empowered Fridays are going to be like. Because I don't know, a lot of people have a misconception of who I am and what I'm about. And, you might thought this was going to be polished and, speech like, no, we're just hanging out. We're just hanging out. That's what we're doing. Fortunately at Xerox, I had a lot of leadership roles. There 10 years, only sold copiers. Think of Xerox, think of copiers. I only did that for a year. I was in the engineering division for a year and made a quantum leap because I was top sales rep as a trainee every quarter, top sales rep as a sales rep selling copiers every quarter. And so when this job opportunity, quantum leap, came about at Xerox, I was actually at work on a Friday. Wow, how about that? And then we had the ticker tape machines showing how old I am. And I read it, what was coming off of it, and it said grade level 10. Now I'm a grade level 4, grade level 10, and it said this word, I couldn't even pronounce it. Zero radiography is what it turned out to be, but I was like, what? Zero radiography? And so Right across the street was a library, Houston Public Library. So those of you from Houston, you know I'm talking about One Alley Center on Dallas Street. Uh, and so I went to the library. We didn't have computers then. To understand what is zero radiography, which at that time was the leading modality for breast cancer detection in America, the leading modality. If you got a mammogram, you typically got zero radiography. I went to the branch manager and I said, Worth Davis, I love to interview for this position. Now, I have to stop for a minute and just tell you a little bit about when I say Worth Davis. When I got to Xerox, I used to come to work early, 6:30, 7 o'clock. And when I would get there, it would be the Wall Street Journal on the floor at the door. I don't know, I came up with this idea, I'm gonna start reading the Wall Street and put it back. And I would just read the business section of it, because I wanted to be able to communicate effectively with potential customers and to understand what was going on that day in the business world, the business arena. And then I forgot and didn't put the Wall Street back. And that would be the day that Worth came looking for his Wall Street. He was the branch manager. That particular branch was the #1 branch at Xerox in the world. And I had the opportunity to work there. And this particular morning, about 7:30, came by in my little cubby hole, Knowles, you have my Wall Street? He said, I need you to come into my office right now. Man, I'm thinking I might get fired. And so I go in and he asked me why. Why do you get my Wall Street? And I share with him, just like I share with you. And he said, you know what? What I want you to do is every morning read the business section, and I want you to come into my office, and you and I spend 30 minutes going over it. What an opportunity for a young Black man right out of college, little business experience, had some success at Xerox, to have the branch manager to be my mentor. And I actually asked him, I said, Worth, I want to be the #1 sales rep one day in the world. And of course he laughed at that. But I was serious. And he used to take me to these meetings and I would be like, why? And they'd be like, Knowles, make some coffee. Knowles, get some coffee. Make some copies. And all these old white men around a table. And they were only the presidents of Exxon, Pennzoil, Shell. Here I am, young Black kid in these meetings, these board meetings. And then eventually I say something. Eventually they said, hey, you can come sit with us. So I've had mentors that really have made an impact on my life, but I'm going to continue this story. So I get this job at the medical division of Xerox, and I go on to become the #1 sales rep in the world, 3 out of 4 years. Then, if you've ever been in that position and you're the very best headhunters, folks that are there to help get employment, they start calling on you. And so I was able in 1988 to become one of the first blacks in America, if not the only and first Black. I'm not sure, so I won't say that. Not 100% sure, to sell MRI and CT scanners. And if any of you understand, in the 80s, it was first generation of MRI and CT scanners, and what that meant from a academic, intellectual, and also from a conceptual basis, to be able to sell a $4 million instrument, a product rather, that required another $4 million to install in a hospital, move around the whole hospital. A big deal for a Black man to be doing that. And then Years later, my final job in corporate America was Johnson & Johnson as a neurosurgical specialist. So I did 20 years in diagnostic imaging. Most people don't know that's my background. They think my background was always Beyonce Daddy. That's not always been my background or my title, Beyonce Daddy. I'm proud to have that title, as long as you add Solange to it. You don't add Solange to it, then I'm pissed off, because I have two amazing daughters, and I'll always remind everyone of that. So here we are. Things are going great. Then this thing called managed care happens in America, where, as you know now, the insurance companies regulate the cost. This neurosurgeon calls me to his office. Mr. Knowles, I can't use the instruments anymore. If I don't reduce my costs here at this hospital, I'm gonna lose my privilege. Those of you in the medical field realize privilege, what that means. Just had a, boy, when you use that word privilege, the other thing came to me was white people, but we'll say that for another day. We'll save that one. But then that's when I had to start thinking about my passion. And what I didn't tell you in my childhood, my dad on Sundays would have these Sunday dinners, and my dad was 6'3", 400, could dance. And on Sundays, after we had Sunday dinner, we had the living room where all the plastic was on the furniture. Am I the only one? Oh yeah, there's a few of you out there know you couldn't go in the living room. I don't even know why we even had a living room. You could never go in it. Had all that plastic stuff on it. But they would go in there and dance, and we had this record player and vinyl, and my dad had a nice collection, B.B. King, Fats Domino, Peaches and Herb. Close your eyes. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. I'm really dating myself now. But, you know, I used to love going on Sundays and holding that vinyl. And my dad gave me a nickel, a dime, a quarter to put on top of that needle so it wouldn't scratch, because he got real upset. He was dancing and it scratched. But it taught me to start reading the liner notes and to create a playlist. I didn't know that was a DJ creating a playlist when I was 10, 11 years old, but I did it for years and loved doing it, and always have loved music. You know, most of the story would have it, the Jedi mind trick, his story, not my story. And we'll talk, one of the things we'll talk about is the Jedi mind trick and the role the media and the marketplace have positioned Black men since slavery. And ladies, we need your support on understanding how we have been positioned in a negative light. And I need your understanding of that and not to buy into all of that negativity. So here we are. I have to make a job change. So I decided to go into music. And I don't have to talk about my music career with you guys and ladies, but it's been really great, great career. And I'll touch on that, but not today. And then I went back to school. I knew that I've always had a forward-thinking, strategic thinking mind to think 5, 6, 7 years in the future. Did that in the music industry with Destiny's Child, Beyonce, Leandra Johnson, Solange, Earth, Wind and Fire, OJ's, to think in the future. And I knew that this music part of this would come to an end. And it's pretty predictable how that will end, especially if you're a Black man in a leadership role. There's a lot of minds out there for you. And I have to accept accountability and responsibility. A lot of it was how I imploded, that chaotic part of self. take me back to my childhood and that racial trauma and not feeling worthy. You see, this whole thing is a cyclical thing. And hopefully, as we have more Empowered Fridays, we can understand and let's have a conversation about them. Went back to school, Cornerstone Christian Bible College in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Got my MBA, went back, got my PhD, both in strategic planning and organizational culture. Last 2 summers, I've gone to Harvard, took ethical leadership in their professional development 2 years ago, cultural intelligence this summer, and learned a lot about cultural intelligence. That is, we'll talk about that one because that's something we all have to understand better. Cultural intelligence. And you know, married this amazing woman 8 years ago, Gina, and boy, what an amazing woman. Hope you have the opportunity to meet her. Every day is the same person that I wake up and go to bed at night. The whole day is always laughter and has encouraged, she has have encouraged me. She have encouraged me. That's not grammatically correct. She has encouraged me. I told you, we just keeping it real, man. To really understand the word happiness. So at 70 years old, soon to be, I work on happiness every day. Some days I just look out the damn window and I'm just creative. Some days I just look at last night I watched the sunset and the beautiful colors that it had, those last 10 minutes. And I realized something that my former wife Tina had told me. One day we were riding in Galveston and the sunset, and she said, the beauty about a sunset is that we'll never live that day again in our lives, because when the sunset, it becomes night. We'll never live that day again. But going back to this amazing woman, Gina, and you can see this smile comes on my face. Just an exciting moment in my life. And to build back trust and confidence and with my family and with my kids. We had a rough ride on this destination. We'll talk about that somewhat. I don't like to go into personal life, but you know, in my vulnerability lies my safety. So here we are. That brings us up to this moment. Met this incredible woman called Dr. Jacqueline King, and had the opportunity to work with her, and now she's given me this platform. And I'm extremely grateful to you, Dr. King, for giving me this platform, and the Black Women Empowered for giving me this platform to have Empowered Fridays and to just have a conversation with you. So I've enjoyed this evening. Look forward to talking to each and every one of you. Talk to you about things I'm doing, places I'm going, support I need from each and every one of you, and how I can support you. So have a great evening, wonderful Friday. Always will tell you can go to MathewKnowles.com to understand anything that I'm doing. And I look forward to talking with you